Hey folks, June the 12th here at 11:30 at night. I hope it all is well with you. With Jerry here, hoping the best for all you guys out there. Praying for each and every one of you there in the days of these great trials that we have, that we are living in, folks. And I just felt compelled tonight. I've not done too much pen to paper stuff here lately, but I kind of want to get back to just a little bit of it. You guys know that we have been into this, or I have been into it, this whole thing about the authorized version of the King James Bible. And how many of you know that this is the only Bible, the only translation of this Bible that carries this title, the Authorized Version? It's the only one that carries that. A lot of people doesn't talk about this, guys, because it's a very profound concept. Now, I know some people are going to tell me, Jerry, King James was the one that had the Bible translated through his scholars, and then he published it. Well, I don't believe that's exactly the way all that went down, guys. I just don't. I believe King James binded the books. He manufactured the books, however, whatever process and they done back in those days in terms of doing that. Sure wasn't mass producing like it is today, though. I can tell you that. And he distributed them, and so he was really in my opinion, the distributor of that book and the publisher of that book, and it had the right to carry the King James Version under that publisher. But folks, back in those days, if we want to go all the way back to the 10th century, authorized meant something very much different back in those days that it would not mean today. It just simply wouldn't. Authorized in the world that we live in today would carry two type of well, actually three types of explanations if you include the old explanation. Well, we're going to go with the modern explanation of this. The modern explanation of authorized would be one of two things. Number one, you would authorize something to abide by a set of laws or standards. And in this instance, those laws or standards would simply be publishing rights or copyright rights. That's what it would mean. It would have in two different instances in the modern version there, it would be a copyright or it would be from a literary standpoint, a legal right of some sort, from legal laws. Those would be the two things. Now, of course, there's a third one, and we'll get to that here in a minute, but the third one is of the old century. Well, let's have a little bit of a discussion about that. First of all, back in the 10th century, folks, there was no such thing as copyright laws, especially when it come down to books, because society was just simply appreciative of the very fact that you had someone who could read and write that had some type of upper level knowledge of some kind to be able to actually put a book into play in society. Another thing, there was no legal laws of no kind that governed that, because again, it took a scholar of the upper echelon to begin with to even write this, because most people could not read and write back in those days. If you could read and write back in those days, you were accomplished. And so because of that accomplishment, and you lacked a lot of plentifulness in literature and books, it just simply was a situation where that there was no such thing as these two things, folks. It just didn't happen. So here is my argument with this. There's only one thing that the Authorized Bible of the King James Version could have meant in the 10th century in terms of ideological thinking and reasoning, in terms of literally thinking, how would you say it? It would not be, it just simply would not be anything but one concept, and that's it. And that would be the concept of King Arthur being the one that had actually taken the Bible and translated it from Hebrew into English, and also translating it in the Greek language over into English. Now, what I was trying to think of a minute ago, and it kind of got past me there, this is the only logical explanation that you can derive that King Arthur would have meant back in ancient days of the 10th century, or authorized. This meant that Arthur, or King Arthur with the eyes in it, that he accepted this book and approved it as being the true translation of the Holy Bible. Now, in order to better understand that, we're going to go to the literal meaning of author in Greek. And there's a few different things that it can mean. One thing it can mean is chief leader. It can also mean the prince. And in ancient Greek, here's what will really get you on this, folks, and this is actually what that it would mean in ancient Greek and ancient Latin. It would mean the perfecter of interpretation or translation. That's literally what King Arthur or author meant. Well, here we are with this Chinese pen not wanting to write. It's just something. It's nothing but garbage these days, folks. It's all we're dealing with. It's garbage. These pens are never any good. Of interpretation or translation. Now that is the literal meaning of, in ancient Greek, the perfecter of interpretation or translation. That is the literal meaning of author. And that makes perfect sense, folks. Now, if you're going to say, well, Jerry, who actually wrote the Bible? I've had some people ask me who wrote the Bible. Well, that's kind of stupid to ask that. Because if you really want to know who wrote the Bible in terms of a logical standpoint, it's whoever the book was written by. Whoever the book was written by. There is no one person wrote the Bible, folks. So it's kind of stupid to even sit and say who wrote the Bible. Well, who wrote the Bible? Well, the Gospels was written by John wrote John, and James wrote James, and Luke wrote Luke, and then the letters to the churches was written by Paul. It was whoever was assigned to that, folks, was the one that wrote all that. And then the Lost Sea Scrolls of the Old Testament and the New Testament was put together, and it was, in my opinion, translated by King Arthur. And then what happened after that, it was taken by King James. And King James took it and made a finished product of it by binding it, having it reproduced, having it distributed, and so he forwarded the process. So, if you're talking in terms of a publisher can carry the name of that Bible the same as the interpreter can, or he can carry it also. It can be carried by the publisher, and it can also be carried by the interpreter, and it can be carried by the originator. So the originator was whoever wrote whatever book that they were assigned to. The interpreter was King Arthur. And then the rest of that whole entire process to get it distributed worldwide was King James. So by every right, it has the right to try or to carry the King James name. That's not what I'm trying to say, folks. I'm not trying to say that it should be turned into the author version of the Bible. King James was, by all rights, he had the right to carry it as the publisher. But I do believe that Arthur was the one that wrote it. Now, you're going to ask me, does anything in the Gospels maybe make reference to Jesus being the great author of any kind? Of the blood lineage of the Merovingian kings, which is what Arthur is from, if you don't understand my concept of that. Yes, in Hebrews chapter 12, Hebrews 12, 2, guys. Paul makes reference to Jesus as looking up to Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And let's see. Hebrews chapter 5, 8 through 9. Though he were a son, yet learned obedience by the things which he suffered. And being made perfect, he became the author of eternal salvation unto all them that come. And so, in two different places, actually, it's mentioned. It's also mentioned in Hebrews 5, 8 through 9. And so it was mentioned by Paul two different times that Jesus Christ was the author. And that's rightfully so, because if King Arthur would have been of direct lineage of Jesus, he would have also been the author to authorize the Bible. This whole thing by the authorized version, of course, I think that Arthur, he made it in somewhere around the 10th to the 12th century. He interpreted both out of Hebrew and Greek the Bible into English. And then, if you take a look at the timeline, what that King James simply done was he took it in 1611 and he done all that I told you that he did. He binded it, he produced it, he distributed it. He was a major player in getting this thing out, and by all means it had the right to do that. Now you're going to say, now Jerry, are you trying to change anything whatsoever? I thought you said the King James is the way to go. It absolutely positively is the way to go, folks, and no other way. And actually, this whole concept that King Arthur was the one that wrote the Bible, it enforces the fact that the King James Bible is the only Bible that you should be making reference to, Because when you think hard enough about it, folks, all these other Bibles, all of them, all these other translations of the Bible would be an unauthorized version. The King James is the only authorized version, and it's the only one that carries that title. So this doesn't go against the whole idea that the King James Version is the only Bible you should be going by. It actually double reinforces it. Because not only is it changing the Word of God, not only is it changing what I think that God thought you were supposed to have, but it's also giving you an interpretation that is unauthorized. Because the King James Version would be the only authorized. And it's the only one that was approved by King Arthur, and the only one that you should be using. Actually, folks, some of these other interpretations of the Bible is getting to the point where they're jokes. I have looked at it, and it's just awful what it's getting to. The King James Version Bible is the only Bible to have, because it's the only authorized Bible to have, in my opinion. Thank you for watching my video. I got some other things lined up for you guys, but I just wanted to bring this whole thing to your attention, because this whole unauthorized Bible, folks, this is what's bringing about this whole New Age concept that's creeping in, where Satan is attempting to try to change times and law like prescribed in the book of Daniel. And it's not right. It's not correct. All this stuff, these new Bibles that's coming along, are unauthorized Bibles. They're unauthorized, and it's not right to be teaching out of them, in my opinion, because they were not approved. They were not translated or approved by King Arthur. More to come, folks. Thank you for watching my video.